Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Latvia once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. The last beers that I've had from this brewery have been very nice actually, and we're going to stick to the same style category for this one, but have a look at a slightly different sub-style. So fingers crossed it's as good as the other beers we've had from them before, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. It's definitely nice to have some more Latvian beers to review for you here on the channel regardless. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to return to Jelgava, which is to the southwest of Riga, the capital city, which is almost right in the middle of Latvia actually. But we're going to have a look at what I believe is my sixth beer from Hopalaa Brewery. So this particular beer is called Session 2. It comes in at 4.9% ABV, and this one is a Session Hazy New England, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, once again, a big thank you to Remants from the brewery for sending the big box of stuff over, and we're just gradually working through these beers. Of course, we're getting towards the end of the IPAs now. We've had 5 reviews before. That was the Abstract, the Nebula, the Hyperjump, and the Cloud 11 and 12, and those were all pretty nice actually. So my first lower alcohol IPA from these guys, but I have had quite a few impressive low ABV IPAs in recent times, so hopefully this one kind of fits into that bracket as well. So yeah, looking forward to trying this one. It's got a nice malt and hop bill to it, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. But nice to have Hopalaa on the channel once again, and as I say, generally speaking, it's nice to get some more Latvian beers to review too. So let's crack on with this review then and see how we get on. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hopalaa Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Latvian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to at the moment because we've got all these Hopalaa beers to work our way through. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. Especially if you're watching from Latvia, it would be nice to learn about a few other breweries, because it's only really these guys now and Odu and Arpus that we get over here. So to learn a bit more about some of the other breweries would be great as well. But it's always great to hear from you guys, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then once again to tell you a little bit about Hopalaa Brewery. So Hopalaa Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Jelgava in the Zemgale region to the southwest of Riga in Latvia. But the brewery is owned by 3 friends. This is Rimants Pavziniuks, Kristaps Stankus, and Einars Rumjancevs. So Einars is a teacher by trade, Kristaps has a background in finance, while Rimants owns his own marketing firm. So they come from quite a diverse background, and this is quite often the case when people get together and start up a brewery. But they apparently discovered craft beer after hearing that a neighbour was brewing something called an IPA, which they had never heard of. So they tried this and were blown away with it, and then they started homebrewing for themselves together back in about 2013 under the name Paleo, which translates into English as Blacksmith Brewery. So they gradually scaled up their homebrewing activities over time and brewed in various different places, but they received positive feedback on their beers from their friends, and they were encouraged to turn professional after this and start up their own company. So over the next few years, they released a good number of different beers under the Paleo name. There was quite a few different English and German styles in there, but there were a few IPAs and stuff like that. But then a bit later on in 2019, they officially registered the name Fermentum, which acts as a parent company, and the beer is released under this brand name, Hopalaa Brewery. But the idea behind using the Hopalaa name rather than Kalju was that, you know, Latvian is a very difficult language, and to try and learn that language without growing up with it is extremely difficult. It's only really related to Lithuanian, as I've experienced in the previous videos, and you can probably tell from my bad pronunciations. It's a very complicated language, but they felt that Hopalaa Brewery was a more kind of a better name for international purposes. Basically, it was a little bit more kind of anglicised, but it still had a little bit of that kind of Latvian side of things to it as well. But Einars is the head brewer. Kristaps takes care of the finance side of things and looks after the yeast and fixes technical problems, whereas it's Remants who is the marketing man and the salesperson for the brewery. And it was him, of course, like I said, that got in touch with me and asked if I was keen to try a few of their beers. So, of course, why not? But the brewery itself is equipped with a 1,000 litre brew kit, and they've been progressively expanding the fermentation capacity over the last little while. They want to experiment with many different styles of beer. They've already kind of started doing this, of course, but they're collaborating as well with quite a number of local small businesses to get different adjuncts for their stouts and sours and stuff like this, you know, fruit companies, farmers, and you know, coffee roasteries and things like this. But there's a number of gypsy breweries also brew their beers at Hopalaa Brewery as well, so hopefully we'll see a few of those beers making their way outside of Latvia over the next few years too. But as of May 2021, these guys have produced around 60 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and no doubt that will increase over the next little while. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Hopalaa Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So, pardon me. But yeah, that's all I've got for you at the moment. Go and check out those links. But let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So, as you can see, the artwork of this one is very nice. Actually, it's quite similar to what we've had from Hopalaa Brewery before. But there you can see in the middle of the can, there is the H, which is the symbol of Hopalaa Brewery. And then you've also got this down here on the side of the can too. But yeah, session 2, this one, it tells you about the beer on the side of the can too, which is great. So the malt base in this one is Pilsner, wheat, flaked oats, and it's flaked wheat as well actually. So yeah, Pilsner malt, wheat malt, flaked oats and flaked wheat, which should be quite nice. And then the hops in this one are Mosaic and Sabro, and it's also got a little touch of lactose in it, and it uses a London fog yeast. Like I said earlier, 4.9% ABV, but this one should be quite nice actually. I'm curious to see how much of a kind of milkshake IPA it is. But yeah, Mosaic and Sabro, both American hops. Mosaic comes in around 14% alpha acid, lovely kind of light, juicy tangerine notes off it. Sabro is a kind of new and interesting one. I think it's slightly higher, maybe about 15 or 16% alpha acid, but again, it gives you a kind of juicy, tangerine orangey type flavour, and also a wee bit of a kind of coconutty quality as well. But yeah, 4.9% ABV, this one, London fog yeast, 440ml can. This should be quite nice. So yeah, one thing, as I say, I've never really got a definitive answer to is, you know, we talk about the difference between paleos and session IPAs. So the paleo is related to the IPA through the hop to malt ratio. So if you start at the bottom, you have the paleo, then the IPA, the double IPA, and then the barley wine. So the hop to malt ratio changes as you go up this family of styles. But when it comes to a session IPA, I believe what they do is they take the malt content down, because then you've got less alcohol, but they stick with the same kind of malt to hop ratio that you would normally use in an IPA, whereas a paleo, obviously that changes, and the paleo's got less malt in it from the start, and then and thus less hops as well. So you know, I've always wondered exactly what the difference is between a session IPA and a paleo, but as far as I can figure, that would seem to be a fairly reasonable technical explanation for you, just if you were wondering, because I'm a nerd like that. But yeah, looks very nice, this one, nicely presented, 440ml can again. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Curious to see what this one has in store for us. Should be very good. So let's go for it. There we are. So let's put the can in this one. Let's get the can lined up just so that my OCD is happy. But yeah, there we are. So as you can see, and as you would expect, this one has poured a lovely kind of nice hazy kind of fruity colour. You'd expect this from a modern IPA, of course, but before it disappears, we can see that the head has poured to be a kind of finger high, and I would say that's a perfect white head, lovely and frothy and foamy, and yeah, one finger height head on this one. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this beer, it looks like a lovely kind of pale yellow colour. This one a little bit like a pineapple juice or something like that. As you know, with these hazy IPAs, I always like comparing them to different kinds of tropical fruit juice, because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. But one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it looks Very nice, this one. Certainly not the haziest that we've come across from them, but you know, at 4.9%, you're not going to expect that, to be honest. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour. Then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Adjuncts and adjuncts and barrel aging are also going to affect that, but lactose isn't really going to affect the colour of the beer too much. The level of haze that you get in the beers, of course, is determined by the oat and the wheat content usually, but the yeast can also play a little bit of a role in there as well. But in terms of a modern IPA, especially this one's basically a New England session IPA rather than a West Coast session IPA, the appearance of this one isn't particularly surprising, to be honest. So yeah, it looks as we would kind of expect from this particular beer. But yeah, nothing else really that we need to say about the appearance of this one. Got a nice level of haze to it, as you would expect from a kind of more session IPA. But let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on with the beer. I'm very, very curious about this. So yeah, that does smell very nice. It does smell very good, actually. It smells kind of similar in malt base to what we've had from the brewery before, but you can smell that the malt base is a little bit lighter and crisper, and again at this ABV, that is something that you should kind of expect. You do get a little bit of crispness from the Pilsner malt coming out on the nose right away as well, but lovely, soft and smooth, fruity, juicy kind of things, and you can smell a little bit of the green component and the lactose quality in the beer as well. So yeah, that's basic first impression of this one. It smells like a little bit of a more kind of crisp version of some of the beers that we've had from them before. And we're going from a little bit of an extreme almost, because the 2 beers that we had before, the Cloud 11 and 12, those were big, thick milkshake IPAs. And before that, we had the triple IPA. So we're going, we're taking quite a step sort of back down the scale with this one, if you like. But the aroma on first impression is very, very nice. But yeah, let's try and break that down a little bit then. So you can feel that the backbone of this beer is very, very nice. You get that lovely kind of smooth white bready quality to this one. A nice fresh smooth white bread in there. It works really nice. There's a little touch of a bread crusty quality in there. Some you can definitely pick up a little bit of the wheaty smoothness and some of the kind of oaty kind of creaminess in there. But the lactose, I think, really smooths it out and sort of amplifies the oats a little bit in this beer for sure. But you do, you can pick up a wee bit of the dryness from the Pilsner malt and a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity character, which is also contributed by the Pilsner malts as well. So yeah, I really do like how that part of the beer goes about its business. Thumbs up to Hopalaa for a nice malt base here. One thing I've found that I quite like with these kind of more sessionable IPAs is that I like them to have a little bit of a wheaty bite to them. I always like it if a lighter drinkable IPA's got a little bit of a wheaty bite to it. So this one has 2 types of wheat in it, so I'm thinking that might be the direction that they've taken this one in. But yeah, the malty base comes across really nicely. You do get a little bit more of that wheaty bite at the very back of the nose as well, but the malty side of the beer, I think, comes across really nicely. Bit of crispness, as I say, 1 or 2 little grainy elements, but you can feel the smoothness of the lactose and the kind of oaty quality, as well as just a little touch of sweetness out of this one from the Pilsner malt and a bit of dryness as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that part of the tasting with the beer. On the hoppy side of things then, let's look at that, the green component. For me, the green component of this beer has a nice little bit of a kind of earthiness to it. There is a little bit of earthiness at the back of the nose there, and that's Mosaic, I think, that's going to give you that. You've got a nice big floral component to this beer. It is slightly spicy. Remember, both of these hops are capable of giving you a big powerful green component, but with New England hazy IPAs, these tend to rely more on late addition hops during the wort boil, which is going to give you flavour and aroma, whereas if it's West Coast IPAs, they've got more bittering hops added in the early stages, of course, but they, usually they do dry hop them and things for flavour and aroma, and do late addition hops as well. You don't get as many early addition hops in a New England IPA, of course, but yeah, the green component for this one, for me, it really leans towards that big green floral aromatic component, and you do get a little touch of spiciness out of this one, which to me would indicate that these hops have been used in the bittering stage as well, and they're not adding a little bit of something else in there too. But yeah, on the grassy side of things, it's got a little bit of a kind of zestiness to it also, which I think works out very, very nicely. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that department as well. So yeah, lovely stuff. Big thumbs up to them on the green component of this. That sort of builds a good bridge with the kind of wheaty bitiness that the beer has. But on the fruity side of things, you know, it's interesting because you can smell a little bit of the coconutty note from the Sabro in there, but you've got this big kind of juicy tangerine quality out of this one, but it smells a little bit more oily because you've got the two hops in there that are contributing to it. And I've found that with beers before. You know, you get things like Azaka and Mosaic and you know, Sabro. If you combine one or more of these hops, then they do give you a little bit more of that oily character that you might get from, say, Amarillo or something like that otherwise. So you do get a wee bit more of an oily orangey character coming out of this one. There's a few wee notes of like an apricot or a pineapple or something like that in here as well. But yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer is all about like a kind of juicy tangerine, but with a wee bit of a kind of coconutty quality from the Sabro sitting underneath. Actually, a lot of people compare Sabro to Pina Colada, and you do get a little bit of that out of this one. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business. So yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one. It's certainly quite an inviting beer, so let's just have a taste of it and see how we get on. Very curious about this. So yeah, the Session 2, 4.9% Session Hazy New England, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Hopalaa Brewery in Jelgava to the southwest of Riga over in Latvia. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers and prieka. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice actually. It's not quite as I expected it. The first impression of this one is that it's actually coming across as a really smooth, lactosey and oaty kind of session IPA. But I like it. I do like it. It's not what I expected, and it's quite different from the session IPAs that you would get over here in Scandinavia. Usually over here they would go for either a more kind of barley malt leaning or bready IPA or something a bit more wheaty and bitey. There probably are other ones out there that would do it slightly differently. Like Apex, I think, might give you a slightly more kind of yeasty and oaty one, but this is very, very smooth, and you can definitely pick out the lactose in this one. So yeah, an interesting approach, and this is why we like reviewing different beers from different places, because you'll always find things like this that will change your kind of concept of different sub-styles and things like this. So I'm going to say thumbs up to Hopalaa once again. These guys are pretty solid in these New England IPAs, but they are quite kind of, they really lean towards that kind of smooth, lactosey, kind of thicker side of the spectrum. So if that's what you like within this style bracket, then these guys are one for you. Personally, I just like trying different things, but I do like this one actually. This is maybe going to make me think a little bit more about some of the session IPAs and things. But yeah, this is very, very easy drinking, which you would want from a more session-like IPA. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? Where do we start to break the flavour down? So, where do we go with this one then? Straight away across the, let's try and break this down a little bit. Straight away across the middle of your palate then, you can actually feel a little bit of the kind of pale malt base to this one. You can feel that going right across middle of your palate there, because it does have a wee bit of a kind of crispness to it, and then you can also feel the slightly thicker, more you can feel that sort of soft white bready character sitting on top of it. So the backbone of this beer is a little bit more of a kind of soft, crisp white bread and pale malty character. That is the backbone across the middle third of your palate there. As you move towards the kind of front of that middle third of your palate, there's maybe one or two little slightly woody undertones to the beer, but you can feel that sitting on top of that, you've got a bit of the wheaty character just spreading forward there as well. On top of the wheaty layer though, this is a very layered flavour, this one, you can feel the the kind of oats and the lactose mixing together. It's like if you go down the middle line of your tongue on top of the wheat, you get the smooth oatiness in there, and you can feel the thicker lactosey quality coming out of the beer. So yeah, it goes together quite nicely actually. But yeah, it's interesting, this one, because the further you go into the aftertaste with it, you've got all these layers that I've just described to you. But when you go into the back half, and again, it's if you follow that middle, that central line of your tongue back the way, you've got that. If you film that, if you go that central, if you follow that line of the tongue back the way, then you do get a little bit of the kind of Pilsner. You do get a little bit of the Pilsner kind of dryness out of the beer as well, which is kind of interesting. So that takes a wee bit of time to come out actually, and it's interesting that you still get that on that back half of the middle third of your palate when you've got all this lactose in there. So that's interesting. In the very centre of your palate as well, you do get a little touch of that kind of butter candy Werther's Original type thing, and that's the alcohol coming out of the beer, of course, I would say too. But yeah, you get a wee bit of a Pilsner, you do get a wee bit of a biscuity note, a McVitie's digestive biscuity note as you move out from the centre of your palate towards the edge of the tongue there. So I can appreciate how that goes together as well. So, yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one. And the further you go into the aftertaste, I think you can feel the wheatiness coming out of this beer as well, and the oats you can feel thicken up a wee bit as well. But I think that describes the middle third of your palate quite well in this one. So I think we can leave it there. But yeah, very different approach to the Session IPA for me. But I have to say, I think it's an interesting one. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, then you feel a little bit of a bready build up there and a wee bit of a bread crusty quality at either end of that middle third of your palate. You do get a little bit more of a bread crusty quality. But as you pass into the back third of your palate, you can feel there is a nice sort of how do you say? You can feel that there's a very nice kind of wheaty. You do get a little bit of that wheaty, white bready sort of thing again. So you get a little bit more bitiness out of the wheat the further back you go. Sitting on top of that though, you can pick out a wee bit of the lactose, but on that back third of your palate you get the yeasty note coming out of the beer. So the flavour is a little bit taller on that back third of your palate, and as you push further forward, as I say, you can feel the flavour starting. As you push further forward, it condenses down then into the middle third of your palate. You can feel that everything's just kind of nice and sort of squashed together in a way. So I do like how it goes about its business in that sense, absolutely. But yeah, that covers the yeasty and malty part of this beer, absolutely. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness there, and again, that I think that's most likely to be from the mosaic. But as you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal. Then as you move towards the front corners of your palate, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of floral aromatic type thing out of the beer, but it's a little bit more of a bright floral aromaticity rather than being spicy as the aroma would give the impression of. But then around the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and grassy and a wee touch more zesty, I would say. So yeah, I like how that side of the beer comes across as well. But yeah, that part of the beer, the green component, I think suits everything else, and it's quite, it's sort of quite calm in a sense, if you like. You get a wee bit of zestiness out of it and just a wee bit of that brighter floral aromaticity, but it builds a good bridge with the more zesty bite, with the sort of more bitiness of the wheat and the overall smoothness and sweetness of the malt base later on. So the green component, I think, balances out the beer quite nicely. But let's focus on that fruity part of the beer then, so front third of your palate. So sitting on top, if you go to that border region again between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up and a wee bit of bread crust in there. Then the base of the front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of, you get a little bit of the crispy pale malt in there, and you get a wee bit of you get a little bit again of that sort of smooth wheat. So I can appreciate how that goes together in this beer as well. But yeah, the way everything kind of pieces together in this one, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, towards the back half of that front third of your tongue, then let's look at the fruity esters from the hops. You go towards the back half of the front tongue, it's interesting because you do get a wee bit touch of a passion fruity note, and as you move further forward, you do get a little bit of a slightly kind of apricot-y note underneath. But on the front half of that front third of your tongue, you get a bit more of a kind of concentrated, zesty, kind of orangey character coming out of the beer. But sitting on top of that, you've got a layer of lighter, juicy tangerine that spreads into the back half as well. But it's interesting because mixed in with the sort of wheaty and slightly oaty notes underneath, you get a little bit of the coconut from the Sabro in there. So the Sabro is doing something very interesting in this beer, and I think it just adds a little bit of depth to the malt base almost, which is really interesting. But in the aftertaste, you do get more of that kind of coconutty flavour coming out of the Sabro too, which is really, really interesting. But yeah, quite a, as I say, little touch of passion fruit, little bit of apricot, and a big orangey character on the front third of your palate. That lighter tangerine orangey note with a bit more of a kind of concentrated citrusy zest sitting underneath, and then the grassy esters on the front tip of the tongue. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business for sure. It gets a thumbs up from me, and I think in terms of a session IPA, it works out really well. Different approach though, as I say, different approach entirely with the lactose and the smoothness compared to what I've had recently. But let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. It does feel a little bit lighter and maybe kind of cleaner in a sense than some of the other beers we've had from Hopalaa before. But overall, I would say this beer is right in the middle of the spectrum. It's got a lovely smoothness to its carbonation. Like I say, it feels a little bit clean. This maybe could pass in some ways for a Nordic beer, which is interesting because I always comment on the cleanliness of the water that you get in the beers up here. You can just taste it. I think the water does affect the taste of the beer quite a lot. But yeah, I think that's a big thing in this beer. This is a very low bitterness beer. It tells you on the can that it's 23 IBUs. I think, IBUs are my weaker point, but I like to think I would have said about 20 with this one. Power of suggestion though, so take that with a pinch of salt. But the malty base in this beer, lovely kind of smooth, like crispness to it underneath, like I say, but it really smoothens out and kind of sweetens up a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste, and just a wee touch of bite. I do find that when you go into the aftertaste with this beer, it develops a little bit more of a kind of bitey character, but the fruity note, like I said, there's quite a wee bit of zestiness out of this one. So in some ways they're replacing the wheaty bite that I've had in a lot of beers from other session IPAs recently in Scandinavia. They're kind of taking a little bit more of the zestiness. They're sort of relying a little bit more on the zestiness in this one to give you that kind of bite, I think, that you need to make a good session IPA. But another solid effort from Hopalaa Brewery. These guys seem to know what they're doing, so I think they've got a good future for themselves if they keep at it. But yeah, this is the 6th IPA I've had from them now, and I think all of them have been pretty solid actually. So we've got 2 more experimental ones to have a look at, and then that is my IPAs from these guys done, and we're on to the sours and the darker beers. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review just now then. So yeah, this one was the Session 2, a 4.9% Session IPA, Session New England Hazy IPA, whatever you want to call it, from Hopalaa Brewery in Jelgava to the southwest of Riga over in Latvia. There we are. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from this brewery, and I will catch you guys in the next review. Sláinte, skål, cheers, and príaka. Do give me some other Latvian brewery recommendations as well. Cheers just now.